Welcome to Africa Today TV. I'm Tara Wall. Marking the pre-launch of this, the only independent U.S.-based and Africa-focused public service television channel available to the African diaspora and internationally minded Americans, the founder and president of Africa Today TV, Dr. Yaya Moussa, joins me to discuss an exciting new Africa-centered channel by Africans for Africans. Welcome, Dr. Moussa. I know this has been a labor of love for you. You must be feeling like a proud papa right now with the birth of this new channel. So please tell us first what it's all about. What is Africa Today TV?
Tara, thank you for hosting me. Africa Today TV, you made it in your introductory words. What is it about? It is about correcting misrepresentations, misperceptions about Africa in this country. We think that people should show Africa under a more positive light, in a more balanced way. So Africa Today TV started out of frustration, so to speak. We wanted to correct, rectify misperceptions and misrepresentations about our continent first. But on the positive side,
well, first, what are some of those misrepresentations, would you say? What are the things that you think people are not seeing and hearing correctly about Africa?
I used to characterize those misrepresentations by what I call the 5 Ds. Namely, when it comes to Africa, the way the continent is depicted is through 5 words: desperation, devastation, disease, death, and disorder. Bad news make news as far as Africa is concerned. But we also have great positive stories to tell. We have outstanding people to show. We have great achievements to show to Americans. And unfortunately, this has not always been the case. So as I said, the most urgent thing is to rectify misperceptions and misrepresentations. As you very well know, this has a bearing on the way important countries like America might treat Africa. In many instances, Africa is treated as a junior partner in international affairs. So our objective is to show. What I'm trying to say here is we recognize that Africa is facing many challenges. No denial about that. But it is important to portray Africa in a more balanced way. Whereas you're talking about Africa's weaknesses and failings, it is also important to talk about Africa's creativity, achievements, expectations, hope, and successes. That's the whole point about Africa Today TV.
Yes, and certainly we want to get to some of those ideas that you have about that. But for people that don't know you or don't know some of your background, talk a little bit about, you're obviously a very well educated and internationally acclaimed businessman. But so how did you, when you sat down and you recognized that there was this problem with how Africa was being perceived over the media airwaves, what made you say, I'm the one that needs to bring more balance to this equation? What made you do that? What propelled you to do that?
Okay. First of all, I consider every single African living abroad as an ambassador of the continent. This is my approach. So my humble self, I see myself as an ambassador of Africa. Africa, people will see Africa through me based on my attitude and my deeds. That's the starting point. And secondly, I've started thinking about beyond my current business practice, what to do to give back to the motherland. And one day, I ran across a gentleman by the name of Frederick Thomas, who happens to be the CEO of MSZ Networks. I'm sure you're familiar with MSZ Networks. This is the American company which brought to this country leading high-profile international TV channels, including Al Jazeera from Qatar, France 24 from France, Russia Today from Russia, China CCTV, and the likes. So I raised the following question to him. I say, where is Africa? You brought everybody to Washington except for Africa. And he jokingly told me, are you up to the challenge of bringing Africa to Washington? This is how it all started. I say, okay, this is the opportunity is knocking at my door. I'm not going to run away. I will take it. This is how it all started.
And how would you say, so surely others have tried, obviously, and there are other Africa-related TV or multimedia entities that attempt to do the same. What makes Africa Today TV unique and different?
This is a very important question. How do we differentiate ourselves from the existing TV channels? Let me stress 3 key features to really emphasize our uniqueness, so to speak. First of all, we are not an entertainment television. We would like to be an education TV channel. Our focus is public service. What we are trying to do is to educate Americans about Africa and later on educate Africans about America to foster mutual understanding. We would like to be the cultural bridge between America and Africa. So feature number 1 is educational public service Africa-focused TV channel. We are unique. Secondly, by design, we have decided to showcase Africa's success stories. Our slogan is broadcasting the continent's hope and success. We leave it to others to portray Africa on the negative traits. As far as we are concerned, we would like to showcase African success stories.
So give us some examples of some of those stories that you envision and that people will see and can expect to hear.
Okay. Perhaps by comparison, have you heard about 3 young tech entrepreneurs from Africa? One from Congo, the second one from Cameroon, the third one from Benin, who respectively made a smartphone, a tablet, medical tablet, and a medical robot specializing in brain surgery, totally under the radar. So those stories are not known. They are largely ignored by the international media. You are aware of the fact that Boko Haram in Nigeria and the abduction of girls has monopolized the air.
The coverage, it's all over the place.
This has totally eclipsed the fact that Nigeria has become the largest Africa economy over the past few months.
It's not just, I heard another guest, I interviewed another guest who said it's not just about, Africa's not just a humanitarian case.
Absolutely.
And that's the image, you want to present a different image of just that being the current image of Africa in some minds today.
As I said earlier, the famous 5 Ds. Africa does not boil down to disease, disorder, death, devastation, and desperation. You know, we are not in need of humanitarian assistance. You know, what we need, somebody said it, trade, not aid. I think that should be the new motto. So coming back to my point, Nigeria is a case in point here. Boko Haram totally eclipsed what was the positive developments on the economic side. Likewise for South Africa, Marikana mining strikes and killings, Kandla compound for President Jacob Zuma, Oscar Pistorius trial, totally overshadowed important achievements by South Africa over the past 20 years since the end of the apartheid. So this is exactly what I mean when I say positives concerning Africa are largely neglected, whereas negatives have been stressed.
And I would also think that, you know, for Americans in general, it would be an educational process, yes, and that's important. And at the same end, for Africans to be able to have a stake and a buy-in and see folks here in America that are thriving, that are doing unique and wonderful things. I think that's inspiring, is it not, for the African diaspora?
Absolutely, it is true. What we are doing here, I mentioned earlier that the aim is to educate Americans about Africa and showcase the good deeds, the positive things in Africa, achievements, creativity, talent, and the resultant performance we have in Africa. This is just one side of the story. As you rightly pointed out, in return, Africans themselves, learning about what the African diaspora is doing here. When I say the African diaspora, I mean two components. You have African Americans and you have African immigrants like myself. You have very successful people here from all walks of life, in sports, entertainment, business, education, culture, you name it. So it is definitely something very inspiring for the African youth back home on the continent.
So tell us, when you talk about on your website, you have a phrase that talks about presenting unfiltered, independent view of Africa. What do you mean by that?
Two things. What we had in mind in starting Africa Today TV was to do two things. First, bring content, import content from the content, TV content from Africa, direct from the source, unfiltered and unedited. If time allows, we can elaborate a little bit on that because Africa is made of 54 countries.
Yes.
We have defined a set of criteria whereby we were going to select African countries whose TV would broadcast in America via Africa Today TV, and we came up with 7 to 10 key African countries. If you allow me, let me tell you what the criteria are. The criteria are the importance of the country's role in African affairs, one. Criterion number 2, the size of the concerned country's diaspora in America, because people will be watching from here. Third, the relevance of the TV programming. Fourth, the quality and professionalism of their television. And last but not least, success stories to showcase. So when you mix all those criteria, you come up with 7 to 10 African countries. So coming back to my point, the first component consists in importing content direct from Africa, from the source, unfiltered, unedited. 3, 4, 5 leading credible African TV channels would broadcast here in America via Africa Today TV. This is component number 1, through very stringent criteria, as I elaborated on earlier. Second component would be in-house production. Down the road, this is a gradual process. We as Africa Today TV, in order to be a fully fledged TV channel, we need some in-house production, and this is something I can elaborate on as well. But step number 1 was definitely to import content from leading African TV channel, aggregate, consolidate, and broadcast in America, unfiltered and unedited.
And why do you think it's important to do it that way, to have that link, if you will, directly from Africa?
It is authenticity. That will be showing to Americans Africans' perspective on Africa's news. Africa by Africans. Africans on Africa. This is my whole point. This is exactly what we mean. So showing Americans what Africans themselves think of the continent and the way they handle the news. What made the news in Dar es Salaam, in Cairo, in Cape Town, in Yaoundé, in Dakar. That's very important, not from the perspective of the international media, but from the perspective of those countries and the TV outlets.
So most folks would be wondering, how will you make up some of the programming? So you talk about what people will be seeing that's coming in from Africa. And you talk about it not just being an entertainment channel, that it's educational primarily, but surely there must be programs you're thinking of that have an entertainment element. Talk a little bit about the programming perspective, if you will. What does it look like? News, documentaries, movies?
Yes.
Talk a little bit about how you see that filling out the schedule.
Okay. I mentioned the challenges we are facing being a fully fledged TV channel. Fully fledged TV channel meaning news, entertainment, documentaries, and films, and you name it. The usual thing, you know, as far as television is concerned. But our focus, our primary focus would be educating. As you very well know, you can educate people while entertaining them. So this is a choice we made. This does not mean that we are ruling out entertainment and we are not going to have entertainment shows. But the key focus of Africa Today TV would be education.
Education, news and information.
News, of course, documentaries, films, entertainment, sports, you name it. But we would like, again, to educate people about Africa because we think it is very important. By the way, to sum up this point, we coined an acronym and we said America has to pay its dues to Africa. Dues, D standing for Discover Africa, U, Understand Africa, E, Engage Africa, S, Support Africa.
Well, in that same vein, I'll just pick up from that because surely there are people out there that are thinking, okay, how do I support and engage with this new channel, that are thinking that they may want to partner or have ideas, show ideas and other things and want to get involved. I know you've spoken a little bit, to me at least, about some guiding principles that you have and that are very important for this independent channel. Talk a little bit about that, and particularly for those who are watching that may have ideas about how they can be involved.
Okay. Let me start by the second leg of your question. How can people be involved? I mentioned how important it is to change people's perception and mindset about Africa. By so doing, just changing the perception about the continent, immediate effect would be to draw more Americans to Africa. Tourism would grow. Investment would flow to Africa. So these are tangible fallouts of what we plan to do. Perception matters. Perception is very important. Image matters. One. Now, you raise a question regarding the guiding principles. In what we do, we will always bear in mind 5 key principles. 1, public service. This is a public service TV channel. Number 2, as I said earlier, we would like to show the winning Africa, successful Africa, hence our slogan, broadcasting the continent's hope and success. Criterion number 3, independence. As we keep on stressing, this is Africa by Africans. This is Africa as seen by Africans themselves. We would like to protect that independence. Another criterion, professionalism, very important. I earlier raised the issue of how to select potential African TV channels we will be working with. And I mentioned 5 very stringent criteria.
Sure.
Professionalism was one of them. So here we are. By the way, Africa Today TV has a team of very seasoned business professionals as well as reputable journalists. Another criteria after professionalism, integrity. Integrity is very important. When I say we would like to broadcast African success stories, we will give Africa credit only when it is due. This will not be a propaganda TV channel, and Africans themselves have to understand this.
That's important.
Our intellectual and professional integrity. Okay, we would like to showcase African success stories, but we are also very aware of the African weaknesses, of the Africa's weaknesses and failings.
Sure. Yeah, that was going to be one of my next questions, because, you know, it is, like you said, it's important to showcase the success stories, and I think people want to see that. But when you're talking news and information, certain things, obviously, and you don't want that, just that negative image, but when uprisings occur and violence and security become issues, I think those are legitimate concerns, even Africans as well as Americans have. So I'm presuming that those will be covered responsibly and intelligently as well.
Absolutely. This is what I mean by integrity. As I said, choosing to showcase success does not mean that you're ignoring your failures and weaknesses. You know, I stress the balance, equilibrium to find in presenting the news. Otherwise, it would very much look like propaganda, which we will be trying to avoid, you know. So, likewise, our criticism of the existing way Africa is portrayed, it looks very much like negative propaganda. So we are not going to do propaganda to fight propaganda. No, what we are simply saying is it is important to have a balance, the full picture, a balanced picture showing both, you know, the upsides and the downsides, the failures and the successes, hope and reason also. I would not say to despair, but challenges, but hope also. Yeah. So let me, if you allow me, I started elaborating on something. I say we are also fully aware of the challenges the continent is facing. A case in point, Africa Today TV. I mentioned to you earlier that the objective was to bring leading Africa TV channels. The first US-Africa Summit will start in a few days. As we speak, I'm still awaiting some of those key leading Africa TV channels to join us in this exciting adventure to showcase the success stories of their own country and of the continent. So you see, one of the weaknesses I discovered going through that process of negotiating with African governments, decision-making is extremely slow. This is one serious issue.
It's a process.
It's a process, but it takes time. And perhaps we Africans, we should change our way of managing time and commitment. Secondly, as a media professional, you know that media and television in particular, it is beyond image. Media and communication are nowadays fully fledged instruments of foreign policy. I would hope that African governments would reach a certain level of sophistication to understand that in today's world, in order to navigate today's complex world, you have to have reliable sources. Sure. You have to have credible communication instruments. Africa Today TV is offering Africa a platform. We are telling African governments, you're coming to Washington not just like a one-off event with President Obama. You're coming to Washington to stay. Seize this momentum, historic opportunity to mark your presence in Washington in a sustained way. Think of Al Jazeera with Qatar, from Qatar, France 24, China CCTV, Russia Today. What is the objective pursued by the respective governments of those countries? The objective here is a strategic one, is not only how to mark our presence in America, but how to build soft power. My point is, I wish my African governments would understand what is really at stake here. It goes beyond Africa Today TV. It has to do with Africa's presence in America and building a leverage in Africa's discussions, negotiations with America.
And the point you made about the U.S.-Africa Summit is a point I was you lined me right up to my next question, and that is this pre-launch, if you will, of Africa Today TV. First of all, tell us a little bit about what that means, what pre-launch is, and then the second part of that is it was a very constructive way for you to start this pre-launch as the U.S.-Africa Summit is taking place, and marking the occasion of your pre-launch with that was a concerted effort on your part, was it not? It was very important for you to do that, right? This
is, at my humble level, this is a modest contribution of an African ambassador. I told you that every single African should consider themselves as an ambassador and do their utmost to project a positive image of the continent through their deeds and through their attitude. So this is my small contribution on the occasion of this summit. Now, to your question, what can lie ahead? What do we plan to do? Now, you mentioned pre-launch. Indeed, this has to do with my earlier point, which is our plan A was to bring 3 to 5 leading African TV channels here in America to broadcast unfiltered, unedited content here in America via Africa Today TV. As we speak, this has not yet materialized, but I decided to be proactive and not sit down and wait and start with something with my very limited means. Now, they are not coming on time. They are late. We need to proceed. So we will be starting with a number of shows, including interviews, showing, profiling outstanding Africans. This is something we can do, but we needed to do something on the occasion of this summit. Now, down the road, we have a much more ambitious agenda. We plan to become a 24/7 fully fledged TV channel. We are working on daily and weekly shows. So the ideal situation would be the one whereby we have our 3 or 4, 5 leading African TV channel as partners, occupying half of our airtime, and Africa Today TV itself offering in-house production.
As we close and as we wrap, can you talk a little bit about the importance of, we both mentioned the U.S.-Africa Summit, but in your view, the importance of this relative to trade, economic development, humanitarian issues, the whole spectrum of what can and should be discussed this week at the U.S. Summit. In your view, can you just capture very briefly what that signifies for you and what it should signify for Africans and for Americans?
First of all, it's a welcome initiative, long-awaited initiative. I would say at last, it's here before us. So President Obama is to be congratulated for taking this action. What does it mean for Africa and America? In my humble view, these are two continents. Your country has the size of a continent. Let me call it a continent. America and Africa, mutual ignorance, which is not, should not be the normal situation, because we have a lot in common. We share a lot. Mind the fact that 40 million Americans are of African descent, 12 to 13% of the population of this country. You have no colonial past as regards to a relationship with African countries. The point I'm trying to make here is we are collectively underachieving, when I say we, America and Africa, because we can do much more. We have common grounds, common interests, a lot to share. Unfortunately, so far, it has been a kind of benign neglect of Africa. I hope this summit will be a new beginning for the U.S.-Africa relationships.
Very well said. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. But I would like to thank my guest, who I'm sure you'll hear more from, founder and president of Africa Today TV, Dr. Yaya Moussa, once again for sharing his vision, passion, and a little glimpse of what's to come for Africa Today TV. Until next time, I'm Tara Wall for Africa Today TV.